Welcome back. All right, so another news of the day video for all you fine people for your Friday, and it's still St. Patrick's Day, so got to wear my other St. Patrick's Day jersey. Now, Buffalo has done it after days and days of leaving their fans in suspense. In reality, Devin Levi probably leaving the team in a little bit of suspense as well, but he has signed his entry-level contract with Buffalo. There are bonuses involved. Now, what's interesting is, usually when it's a later round draft pick, usually there isn't this amount of hype. Usually there isn't this much discussion of him coming in and playing right away, especially a goaltender. So with the bonuses that are involved, his cap hit could end up being high for a rookie, for a young guy. But at any rate, the expectation and the hype around him is high. So I'm not that surprised to see the contract end up being in line with what you would normally see for a top 5 draft pick in the National Hockey League. So for Buffalo, they got their fingers crossed that Levi's going to be the answer and that Levi and Luukkonen would be their goaltending duo going forward. That's been the way this has been pointing for a while. So all the best to Levi now that he's signed his contract, graduated from the NCAA, and he's going to get his shot at a regular job in the National Hockey League next season. Pelletier scratched last night, and what's interesting is that fans always get worked up about rookies and kids getting scratched or not getting enough ice time. I've talked about this before. This is not something new to the National Hockey League. This is very old school. That players who are rookies are considered more unpredictable, and you know what you're getting with the veteran players. So I always see the why is this player being scratched over this player? Well, they don't play the same role is usually my answer to that. So if you have a veteran who can play fourth line minutes, sure, he doesn't give you any offense, but you know what you're getting defensively. He may be a penalty killer, and he's a predictable player. You're going to keep him in the lineup over top of the kid that might be a little more unpredictable and who you feel needs a little more time, right? So I didn't read too much into Pelletier being scratched, as I don't with kids being scratched, but I will say this. He took it well. He said the right things after the game. The one thing, too, to keep in mind is they beat Vegas 7-2. Usually when a team wins a big game like that, you leave the roster the same for the next night. So barring injury, Pelletier probably won't be in their lineup the next game either, which I think is fine. I think Pelletier has a lot of talent, but again, I trust a coach like Daryl Sutter with his lineup and who's in or out of the lineup. And again, I've seen this argument for years now where the argument is made of, well, why aren't these kids being given more minutes? And these guys are ready and they should get more time. But coaches just don't do that. In general, it's going to be the veterans that they've worked with for years or who they've seen for years in the event that they're a newer coach. And you just trust them. You trust the veterans more, right? So, for Calgary, I think they're doing the right thing here. And I understand the trepidation some may feel about how things are being handled. But again, with rookie players, that's always been the case. They don't get the same level of trust the veterans get. Jonathan Drouin. So this is a new situation with Montreal. I didn't see this coming. Missed a practice today, or a meeting today. And so he wasn't at practice after the meeting. So basically, Marty St. Louis saying, this is non-negotiable. You show up at meetings. And he wouldn't commit on whether or not Drouin is going to play tomorrow. And I've seen headlines saying he won't play tomorrow, but anything I saw said there's no commitment to whether or not he's going to play tomorrow. Drouin has had a better run of it lately than he did over the last, I'd say, year. He's been very good over the last month, and it would be a shame if something sidetracked that now. So all we know is that he missed a meeting. He's not at practice. And it's possible Marty St. Louis uses that to say, you know what, you can't be in the lineup on Saturday, which there are a lot of coaches that will uphold that because you want to make sure there's some kind of a consequence, or else how do you get the rest of the players, and the young players especially, to respect that there are certain things that have to be done. So Drouin may very well not be playing in their next game against Tampa Bay, but again, that's not confirmed. So St. Louis, Jordan Binnington, comparing his going before Department of Player Safety to Will Hunting and all this fun stuff. And I've seen articles talking about Binnington's now the most hated player in hockey. And somewhere, Tom Wilson's reading that and throwing stuff. And Brad Marchand's probably got an eyebrow raised and going, really? You think so? And Nazem Kadri might be rolling his eyes and going, I don't know about that. If we talk about the most hated player in hockey, I don't know if Binnington cracks the top 5. Not consistently. Binnington, the temper outburst we saw from him in the game against Minnesota, that's not been his MO since he was publicly called out by Craig Berube earlier in the season. It was like, all right, just play the net. And I don't think Berube's happy about this either. And so Binnington was hoping that it would be less games, so I guess he was hoping for 1 rather than 2. And I mean, he also said that he didn't think his blocker connected. He's watched it a number of times. He doesn't think he actually hit Hartman. Basically insinuated that Hartman's acting and all this. So, yeah, the 4th and final meeting between Minnesota and St. Louis, if Binnington plays that game, and you know what? With Craig Berube behind the bench, I don't know that he'd put him in. I get the feeling it'll be Grace. Even if Binnington can go, I get the feeling it'll probably be Grace. Because I don't think Berube likes all of the drama around this either. So they've called up Hofer. We'll see whether or not Hofer's given a game while he's called up. Because he's seen as potentially being that next goaltender for St. Louis. The interesting thing to me with Binnington is just how the numbers have dropped off, and I just wanted to mention this here because I don't think he's had as bad of a season as some make it out to be, but also if you look at goals saved above expected, he is well below the 0 line, so he is allowing more goals than expected. So is the defense in front of him bad? Yes. Is he having a great season? No. And those two things combined, you have a team in St. Louis that's 16 points out of the playoffs. But his numbers, the save percentage, which I like to use as an indicator for how a goaltender's doing, has gone from 927 in 2018-2019 when they win the Cup to 912 the following season, 910 the following season, 901 last season, and this season it's 892. So I do wonder with St. Louis going through this, and I think it'll be a quick retool, what is Binnington's role? Is Binnington going to be the guy? And if he is, how do you get his numbers back into the 912, 915 category? So it is a fascinating one because Binnington, prior to that run in 2018, where he ends up being their starting goaltender and leads them to a Stanley Cup, he cleared waivers. He was back and forth between the AHL and the NHL until he's like, I don't want to go to the AHL anymore. I'm done with that. And he wasn't really seen as a blue chip prospect either. And then Stanley Cup. And I've talked about how with Cam Ward, there were times that it felt like, and I understand it, I get it, like Carolina fans would kind of overrate Cam Ward a bit because he won them the Stanley Cup in 2006. And I think there's some of that with Binnington as well with St. Louis. So I'll be interested to see in the offseason what they do and what they decide is the best route forward when it comes to the goaltending and the blue line, because clearly there are problems with St. Louis's blue line. So I think when we get into all the blame game, I think the reality is probably that gray area in the middle of the goaltending and the defense, and there being issues with both. I wanted to talk today, too, about players who are playing better since being traded to new teams. I wanted to do this because it does get talked about a lot in the comments, and so I wanted to talk about these 9 in particular, although there are a few others that I might have been able to make the argument for and put on the board. But the one question mark becomes, okay, so over a full season next year, would they keep this up? And that can be a question mark because at times a player will respond really well to a trade, and then the following season, their point totals basically revert to what their normal standard is. So we'll start with Beauvillier because he's getting a lot of play right now with Vancouver. In New York, in 49 games, he had 9 goals, 11 assists, 20 points. In Vancouver, 18 games, 7 goals, 9 assists, 16 points. Now, Beauvillier's fit in really well, and he's playing top 6 minutes in Vancouver. If you notice on the other side of this too, Horvat's totals are not in New York what they were in Vancouver, which we could have expected. The New York Islanders do not play that offensive up-tempo style in the same vein as what Vancouver has. And with Tocchet, the Canucks have kept a lot of that offensive up-tempo while getting that defensive structure in there that they didn't have with Boudreau. And, of course, the goaltending getting a lot better with Demko, and I think that improves their play as well, having that confidence in the goaltender. But Beauvillier is a guy who gets talked about a lot. Does he get moved? Did they keep him? I think they keep him based on his numbers right now. Jacob Vrana has had a good little run here with St. Louis. He played 5 games in Detroit. 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. Very tumultuous season for him. But in 5 games in St. Louis, he now has 4 goals. And it is a small sample size, but it's encouraging that Vrana's got his goal scoring back. And I would be very surprised if St. Louis doesn't find a way to keep him in the offseason, and that we see Vrana maybe be getting up to 25, 30 goals next year based on whether or not he can stay healthy and all that other fun stuff. Rasmus Sandin, a huge change for Sandin in Washington. So in Toronto, he played 52 games, 4 goals, 16 assists, 20 points. And I've talked for years about how much I like Sandin's game. In Washington, in 6 games, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. Sandin's been fantastic. Orlov leaves Washington and has to turn around in Boston. So 43 games, 3 goals, 16 assists, 19 points in Washington. And Boston, 3 goals, 9 assists for 12 points in 10 games. Scoring's been off over the last 4 or 5 games from where he started, but still. Orlov has really been quite the addition for the Boston Bruins, who seem to get these hits at the deadline. Dodonov has had a great turnaround, and so has Gurianov. This is a trade that's worked for both teams, because I've seen fans of either team saying, oh, that trade worked out really well for us. The trade worked out really well for both. Dodonov in Montreal, 50 games, 4 goals, 14 assists, 18 points. Looked lost at times. In Dallas, in 10 games, he has 3 goals, 5 assists for 8 points. So he's almost scored the same number of goals in 10 games in Dallas as he did in 50 games in Montreal, and his points are around half in 10 games of what they were in 50 games in Montreal. Gurianov, on the other hand, he has scored more goals in Montreal than he did all season in Dallas. In Dallas, in 43 games, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points. In Montreal, 10 games, 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points. Gurianov, the talent has always been there. It has been a matter of the consistent results. So he's on a hot streak right now, and I do hope that continues. Gurianov absolutely can be a 20 to 25 goal scorer in the National Hockey League. Klingberg, who went through a really tough season in Anaheim, 50 games, 8 goals, 16 assists, 24 points. Since going to Minnesota, he has made a positive difference. 6 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. I almost put on the board the fact that his plus-minus has completely turned around, but he went from Anaheim to Minnesota. He went from one of the lowest-rated teams in the league, standings-wise, to one of the best defensive teams in the league in Minnesota. So it makes sense that his plus-minus would get a heck of a lot better. That's why, that's where you take plus-minus, and you go, you know what, I'm just going to, that's nice, that's great and everything, but grain of salt, right? Nemestikov has turned his game around in Winnipeg. Now, sadly, the Winnipeg Jets have not. The Jets are still finding ways to lose games. But in 57 games in Tampa, he had 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. He arrives in Winnipeg via San Jose. 7 games in Winnipeg, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points. He's played well. He can play up and down the lineup, and it's nice to see his numbers turn around. Again, for Winnipeg, they need more players who are doing this than what we have right now. And it's left Winnipeg in a position where they may miss the playoffs. And then I want to finish off with Jonathan Quick, who we've talked about a lot. But the numbers show he's gotten better. In LA, he was 11, 13, and 4 with an .876 save percentage. In Vegas, 4-1. And even after last night's game, where he gets shelled by the Calgary Flames, he still has a .904 save percentage. So he bounces back in the next game. He ends up right back up in the .908 to .910 range with Vegas. And the 4-1 record with Vegas has been impressive. So Calgary puts the first loss in Vegas, on Vegas, in their history, and they give Quick his first loss as a Vegas Golden Knight goaltender as well. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.